Gayton McKenzie's department has officially blacklisted the South African Music Industry Council, known as Samic, a move that has sent waves across the arts and culture sector in South Africa and raised deep questions about accountability, mismanagement, and transparency in the handling of public funds intended for the creative industries. The Department of Sport, Arts, and Culture, under the leadership of Gayton McKenzie, made the decision after Samic repeatedly failed to submit its required financial and narrative reports, despite being given numerous reminders and deadlines. The revelation that Samic, an entity that once received over $1 million from the department to organize an elective conference, has now been listed as a defaulter, has sparked discussions about how such organizations are monitored and how taxpayer funds are safeguarded in these sectors. This incident highlights not only the administrative failures within Samic itself but also reveals broader systemic concerns that have been brewing for years within various cultural organizations that rely on government funding to sustain their activities. To fully understand how things reached this point, it is important to look back and consider the historical context of Samic and its relationship with government departments. Samic, established as a council to represent and advocate for the music industry in South Africa, was intended to be a bridge between government and artists, ensuring that musicians' rights were protected and that policies were advanced to support the growth of the sector. Over the years, it positioned itself as an important voice for the creative community, securing funding from both the Department of Sport, Arts, and Culture as well as other departments like Trade and Industry. These funds, meant to empower artists, facilitate conferences, and build capacity, were supposed to help formalize the music industry, create opportunities for musicians, and strengthen industry structures. However, cracks began to appear as allegations of mismanagement, internal conflicts, and financial irregularities surfaced within Samic. In 2021, the department released over $1 million to Samic in multiple tranches, earmarked specifically for an elective conference that eventually took place at Birchwood Hotel in Boksburg. Yet according to insiders, a significant portion of these funds disappeared, reportedly stolen by members of Samic itself, leaving the council unable to account for the expenditure when called upon by the department. A memorandum of agreement between Samic and the department clearly laid out the terms under which the funds were disbursed. It stipulated an initial allocation of $602,000 for the financial year, with strict conditions attached. The first tranche of $541,800 was to be released upon signing of the agreement, with the second tranche of $60,200 contingent on submission of a narrative and expenditure report by May 15, 2021. This process, designed to ensure oversight and accountability, was evidently not followed through as Samic failed to meet these reporting requirements. Furthermore, this is not the first time Samic has come under scrutiny. Previously, the Department of Trade and Industry terminated its relationship with the council after it failed to account for $500,000 allocated for its operations. The council, it later emerged, had even been deregistered due to non-compliance with regulatory requirements, raising the question of how it continued to receive funding from different departments despite its administrative shortcomings. As the scandal unfolds, various figures linked to Samic have sought to distance themselves from the controversy. Former President Eugene Thethwa, who was ousted from his position, has stated that he was no longer part of the council when the funds were paid out and has insisted that he had already raised concerns with then Minister of Trade and Industry, Ibrahim Patel. He emphasized that the focus should now be on Romeo Ketsamani, whom he described as the engine behind Samic at the time. Current President Vusilo also redirected queries to Ketsamani, who, up to this point, has not responded to requests for comment. What stands out most in this situation is how an organization that was deregistered and no longer compliant with legal obligations could still be able to negotiate, receive, and utilize substantial amounts of taxpayer money without basic accountability measures being enforced. This points to a glaring gap in how monitoring, evaluation, and compliance checks are conducted by departments distributing public funds. It also brings to light the importance of leadership continuity, transparency, and the proper handover of responsibilities within such organizations to ensure that even after leadership changes, financial and administrative records remain intact and accessible for audits and reviews. The decision by Gayton McKenzie's department to blacklist Samic may appear harsh to some, but for others, it is a necessary and overdue step to enforce compliance and restore integrity in the funding processes that govern the arts and culture space. The implications of this move stretch beyond just Samic. It sends a clear message to other organizations that if they fail to meet reporting obligations and misuse public funds, they too will face similar consequences. McKenzie's department is showing that under his leadership, financial accountability and good governance will be prioritized, and entities that have historically benefited from loose oversight will now be held to stricter standards. This could potentially mark the beginning of a larger cleanup operation in the sector, which has long suffered from fragmented leadership, poor governance structures, and allegations of corruption and maladministration. Moving forward, the blacklisting of Samic forces stakeholders across the creative industries to reflect on how they operate and whether they are adequately prepared to meet the governance standards expected of them. It also places pressure on the department itself to strengthen its internal controls and ensure that before funds are disbursed, thorough due diligence is conducted. Moreover, this incident might spark renewed calls from artists and industry bodies for more inclusive, transparent, and accountable representative organizations, as many musicians feel left out and unrepresented by councils plagued by infighting and financial scandals. In closing, the blacklisting of Samic by Gayton McKenzie's department is more than just an administrative action, it is a reflection of the serious need to clean up and rebuild the trust and credibility of cultural organizations in South Africa. It exposes long-standing issues of mismanagement and highlights the urgent requirement for stronger oversight and accountability in public funding processes. What happens next will depend heavily on how decisively the department follows through on enforcement, how other councils react, and whether this sets a lasting precedent in the sector. For you guys watching, what are your thoughts on how Gayton McKenzie's department has handled this situation? Do you think this will change how other cultural organizations manage their funding? Let us know what you think in the comments. If you found this video informative, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so you won't miss future updates on important stories just like this one. Your engagement helps us bring you even more content that matters. Thank you for watching.